What is up, Pacer Nation? Welcome to the Pacer Pulse Podcast, the heartbeat of Indiana basketball. And today, guys, I got another fun trade episode, and this one wasn't easy for me today because it involves a player that I hold dear to my heart. He's my favorite player on the team, and I've just had a lot weighing on my mind the last few days, and maybe trying to come to grips with reality, I guess you would say, or just not with that, but at least the possibility that this guy could possibly get traded at the trade deadline. And I really try not to be biased with this show. I clearly, like any other fans, I have favorite players on this team that I really like, and I try to be like as unbiased as possible and be fair to all the guys and not really favor one guys or dislike others. I really try to be fair. I know I'm not perfect at that a lot of times, as it's just human nature. We all have our favorite players that we pull for, that we vouch for. And today I'm going to try to go against the grain of what I've really done lately, and that's I'm going to talk about Ben Mathurin possibly being traded. And if you guys have seen the reports lately, there was a report that came out. So take this with a grain of salt, possibly, because it could literally be nothing. But I guess a report came out where they were saying how Ben Mathurin has wiped his Pacer bio off of his Instagram, and like other Pacer photos that he had on Instagram, he's wiped off, and that he put like a black picture on his Instagram profile. So, anybody's going to aggregate that and like take that as, he's about to get traded and this or that. And he's just kind of like preparing everybody for it. Or maybe he just found out from the front office that they're looking to trade him before the deadline and this or that. But that's all hearsay. You don't really know. I mean, Giannis did the same thing, and now he's saying how he's never going to demand a trade out of Milwaukee. So it's a wish-washy sort of thing, in my opinion. You could take it with a grain of salt, or you could take it with a lot of meaning behind it and really run with it if you wanted to. So it's a narrative that anybody could fit into their own narrative as long as you have a certain narrative, right? So like the Mathurin supporters are probably going to like disregard it, of course. The people that are not Mathurin supporters are going to run with it and be like, oh, like he's going to get traded. This is what we've been saying. So I don't know, guys. Either way, take it for what you think it is worth, I guess. I just wanted to put that information out there. But I wanted to take off my Mathurin lens glasses for a second here and just see, all right, like this guy, he is approaching restricted free agency. And I want to take the approach that if we absolutely are not willing to pay him or sign him to an extension, and if we're absolutely dead set on Haliburton, Nesmith, Nembhard, Siakam, and said center, that we get whatever starting center we get as our lineup, and are we willing to pay Mathurin 20 to 25 million to be like a Manu Ginobili type of six man? I would say a guy that should be a starter in this league, but for our team, for whatever reason, we would not start him because of our success with the lineup that I just mentioned. Then all that kind of factors in, and let's say the front office doesn't believe they want to pay him that to be in a role that they think they can get for cheaper or whatever. So I'm trying to factor that in and factor in that line of thinking and be like, okay, so let's assume that that's our line of thinking and the front office is looking to trade him and get out ahead of this and get some sort of value in return for Mathurin. So as much as like I'm going to include him in a trade here, and these are two trades that I do believe could possibly vault us into championship contention again if we make these sort of trades. So this first one, obviously, I'm going to cover is for center. And the second one's going to be a little bit more of a surprise, I would say, where it's not expected, but it could help shore up some of what we're going to miss if we do end up trading Mathurin, because he obviously does provide a role of being that kind of scorer that you never know is going to drop like 30 points in any given game and really give you an advantage in any sort of game at any moment, because we've seen it happen in Game 3 of the finals last year where he dropped 27 against the Thunder, and we don't win that game without that game from Mathurin. So I do think that's pretty much slept on by almost any fan that isn't a fan of Mathurin, is the fact that we don't win that without him going off in that game. And who knows if that would have been, what, a 4-game series then, or 5. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't go 7 without that, I think. And obviously other things as well, but it was equally as part of like such a huge game. So Oh no, I don't mean to go on a tangent, but let's just say that we try to like find somebody to replace his production somewhat off the bench and or a starter, slot starter, whatever you want to call it. So I'm gonna cover this first trade, and it may be a hefty price to pay, but like I said, if we make these two trades, I do think it would put us back into like contention status. And that's obviously saying if Haliburton comes back, the same Haliburton eventually ends up being better, possibly. It's still on that same trajectory that he was, isn't hindered by this injury at all. So that obviously factors in. So this first trade I'm going to talk about here is with the Los Angeles Clippers. So I have us trading Bennedict Mathurin, Jarris Walker, and a first round pick in 2027 for Ivica Zubac. So I could easily see where like the argument would be where that's a lot to trade for Zubac, and I could also see the supporters that would be like, oh, like do that in a heartbeat. I mean, if you get a guy like Zubac who was borderline All NBA player last year, I mean, you do that in a heartbeat, and maybe you consolidate some of these young assets that you've kind of collected over the years that you may think might not have huge roles with this team moving forward, whatever your thinking would be, and you cash in on that and get an All NBA, close to an All NBA level center in Zubac, who even Clipper Nation is kind of, I've seen this on the Locked On Clippers podcast where they've had episodes where they talk about, hey, is a team better off having like a stretch center like Brook Lopez versus Zubac because they had some success without Zubac there with Brook Lopez and it gave their offense more spacing and whatnot because they have so many non-shooters in that lineup with like Chris Dunn and John Collins anyways. So adding like another shooter to that, I guess they thought at center helped, whatever reasoning, but it's an interesting topic nonetheless. And obviously we have a need for center. And I don't know, guys, like as much as I would hate to lose Mathurin, I'm the biggest number one Mathurin fan. I would not trade him. And I'm not even saying I would do this, but would I be extremely upset if this is what became of a Mathurin trade? No, I wouldn't. If we were able to get a guy like Zubac, who clearly would propel this team and take us even a step further than what I say would even be like last year's team, where I know obviously the next step would be winning a championship, but Zubac is clearly a better player than Miles Turner in my eyes. I have always thought that. I have always believed that in my heart. And I know all the Miles Turner supporters would have always said, oh, like, but he doesn't stretch the floor like Miles. That's always been the one argument for Miles. And granted, I'll give him that. He can stretch the floor, okay? But, like, Zubac literally does everything else that you would want from an NBA center. He can finish inside. He's great interior defender. He's a better passer than Miles, too. So he makes some good passes. He would like be a better screen setter than Miles, better rim runner, better lob threats, pretty much in every other aspect of the game, besides maybe like shot blocking and shoot like 3-point shooting. Zubac is better than Miles Turner. So imagine adding a center like that, of that caliber, to a starting lineup of like Haliburton, Nembhard, Nesmith, Siakam, and Zubac. And that's already clearly like one of the best lineups in the East by far. I mean, I don't think that's an argument there. I don't think anybody would argue against that. I think we would be highly talked about going into the next season. Like, hey, the Pacers right back into contention status, adding Zubac and having Haliburton back and just bringing in a top pick possibly and anything else that we could possibly add. That would be huge, guys. So that's where I'm like, man, I wouldn't hate losing Mathurin, but if you bring a guy of like Zubac's caliber in, it's something you have to think about. And maybe a Mathurin, Walker, and a first is like too rich for Zubac, but let's say that's what it takes. And what if the Pacers are like, hey, we are like a Zubac away from winning a title? Could you fault them for making that kind of trade? I guess not. I really guess not. And I think what helps soften the blow is you still have Haliburton, you would still have Nembhard, Nesmith. These guys are still younger, like 26 or younger still. So you would still have like a decent window. Then if you get a top 4 pick in this next draft, you're going to have another young guy that you can at least lean on going into the future, even past, like, let's say, Siakam and TJ McConnell on these guys' primes, and be able to, like, really extend that window, I guess you would say, going into the future with Haliburton and a top 3 or 4 pick in this next draft. So I think that really changes a lot of things, too. It changes your perspective on a lot of different things. And, yeah, it would hurt losing Walker and then Mathurin for sure. Like, trust me, it pains me to even say that. And then I guess like a first, like we wouldn't even really need a first the next year if we're looking to contend. It's going to be a late first you hope for anyways. You never know, but still. And maybe that's what it takes for the Clippers to trade Zubac. So that's why I kind of sweeten the pot even more in this trade. And that works in Fanspo. It works perfectly. I mean, the salaries match up well. But the only caveat I would say is with the Clippers want to bring back Mathurin and sign him to an extension where I think they're trying to keep their books pretty clean in the next 2 or 3 years to go after like really big name free agents. I don't know. Maybe they'd be fine with bringing in a young talent that they see could develop into a star like Mathurin. And it gives them another scorer for when Kawhi goes down or James Harden as they age too. Maybe it kind of helps bridge a gap in between different timelines too, in a sense. But he still obviously helps them win now. Jarris gives them another guy they can try to develop and another shooter that they could use and just another utility guy, kind of a guy they don't have too many guys of that size, I would say, wings and like power forward positions. So I think he would provide some value to them that they could just obviously bring in youth. That's what they really need too. So maybe I could see them being very enticed by that kind of package. So it's just seeing if the Pacers would be willing to do that, and I would not blame them one bit if they didn't want to do that. It would be hard for me to do that, but like I said, you would have to really believe that he's the missing piece to a title contender. Plus, if we're bringing in a top lottery pick and this other trade that I'll talk about next, but that's what really intrigued me, guys. And this is why I said these two trades, I think, that I'm talking about today could really put this team back into title contention fully and also possibly win a championship. And I think that's what it's all about at the end of the day. As much as you get attached to these players, as much as I'm attached to like Mathurin or would not want to trade him, I guess at the end of the day, you do have to think about like, hey, this is going to help the team win for the better. I have to like let go of however I feel about said player, right? So that's going into my thinking too. It's very hard for me to talk about, but for that kind of trade, I don't know, guys. I think it could make a lot of sense. Like I said, if we do think we're that close, and I know it's been talked about at nauseum about Zubac and whatnot, but that's why I wanted to talk about this trade podcast a little differently, and the fact that like these two trades, I think, could make us title contenders. It's not just like we're trading for a Daniel Gafford or like a Claxton or a Messi and we're like hoping to be contenders. No, I think if you add like a Zubac, you're definitely back in the title contender mix without question, in my opinion. And he would flourish next to Haliburton, like he flourished next to James Harden last year, who's a great assist man in his own right. But imagine next to Haliburton, who's probably like the best passer in the NBA besides Jokic. I mean, arguably. So yeah, I mean, he would flourish here. And just imagine like all the easy shots like Haliburton could get or anybody else could get in the pick and roll with Zubac. And yeah, he doesn't provide the floor spacing, of course, but then like you have Jay Huff at least as a backup who provides that element as well. So you got a guy that at least can pull like shoot from three, defend the rim, and Jay Huff who can kind of do a little bit off the dribble too. So I think it's offers like a good balance between the two. You at least have both options. And then we always have that option of going small with Obi Toppin at the 5, like we did a lot in the playoffs last year. If we think that, I don't know, like Zubac is at a disadvantage in a series or Jay Huff is, like we at least have that optionality. So I could see this being very enticing. And it would be one where I'm like, man, that's a lot to give up, but I would understand it completely and I would be behind it. But I would be hurting at the same time, if that makes a lot of sense, Pacer Nation. And so if you're listening to this on YouTube as well, let me know in the comments what you think of that. If you think that's way too much for Zubac, I mean, I would fully understand, but I would love to hear your guys' opinion on it. And as always, just please like, comment, subscribe on YouTube, and would always appreciate 5-star reviews on the listening platforms like Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Would mean a lot to me, guys. I appreciate it. So that's my first trade I'm really covering here. So this next trade is kind of like a domino effect, let's say, from that trade. So in this scenario, the Pacers have Zubac under the roster now. So we're without Mathurin, without Walker, and so that leaves some pretty gaping holes in the rotation, right? So obviously Mathurin, kind of like a starter / super six man, provides a lot of scoring in different ways that this roster would miss without him. And Walker, just another young rotational wing player that we would miss. But my thinking is with Walker, losing Walker first, is the fact that we have Johnny Furphy waiting in the wings, excuse me. So he could easily just slot in to that Walker role. Probably actually do it a little better, honestly. I know Furphy has a pretty high ceiling, in my opinion. He's like taller than Walker. He's not as big, of course, but He's lengthy. He's super athletic. He's probably more athletic than Walker, and he makes less mistakes. He really fits the style of play that we like to play. So my thinking was, all right, you lose Walker, but you can just easily slot in like Furphy into Walker's role, and I don't think you're really hurting that much. So, and that's not like a slight to Walker. It's just I'm that high on Furphy and his potential, but I do think that that's something you can live with as a Pacer fan or as like the Pacers front office. And plus, Furphy's only making like $2 million per year over the next like 3 or 4 years. So anytime you can get guys on the cheap like that, and Walker will be extension eligible coming up, guys, like next year. So like how everybody's like talking about this with Mathurin right now, you have that same conversation with Walker and like Shepherd, those guys going into next year. So you're kind of playing that game all over again. So maybe you get out ahead of it and trade for a guy, you consolidate those guys and get Zubac. But like I said, this scenario that I'm about to talk about next factors in that we don't have Mathurin now, we don't have Walker. So you kind of have gaping holes in your rotation in the bench, let's say. Let's say our starters is Haliburton, Nembhard, Nesmith, Siakam, Zubac. The bench so far would be like Obi Toppin, TJ McConnell, Johnny Furphy, Shepherd, Isaiah Jackson, Jay Huff. That would kind of be the guys off the bench so far. So this is why I included this next trade. And it's kind of like out of nowhere, but I'm a big fan of this player, and I think he's been a pretty high-quality player for their team this year. And I think he would fit a role that we would perfectly need in this scenario if we would lose Mathurin and Walker. And in this trade, I have us trading with the Chicago Bulls. And I have us trading for Ayo Dosunmu, and I have us trading Isaiah Jackson and Ben Shepherd. So, excuse me. Ayo Dosunmu is in the last year of his deal, right? So he's making like $7.5 million this year. Let's say going into free agency. So let's say if we trade for him, I get it. Like the argument would be, oh well, we could just lose him in the offseason for nothing. So my argument would be like, okay, like it would hurt to lose Shepherd, given what he's done for the team so far. But like I said, he is going to be extension eligible soon. And you're going to have to make that decision. So maybe you get out ahead of this a little bit, and this helps at least clear up some salary, worst case scenario. So at least you're getting off of Isaiah Jackson's contract. You're getting off of Ben Shepherd and like maybe the possible decision you're going to have to make with that in the future. And he's kind of been underwhelming this year, even if he's shooting better lately. But if you could take a swing on like an Ayo Dosunmu, who he's a 6'5" combo guard. So if you don't know much about him, he plays for the Bulls, of course, but like he is kind of a combo guard. So what's nice about him is he would be able to play next to like Haliburton in lineups. He'd be able to play next to Nembhard in lineups. He could play next to TJ McConnell off the bench in lineups. He provides a lot of versatility, and a guy that can be a spot starter too in case of like, let's say Haliburton needs the rest, or TJ's getting older, so he may be out soon, so he could take up like the backup point guard duties, or if Nembhard gets hurt, he can slot into that position. So he just provides a lot of flexibility with our team, and just a guy that I think he's still young. He's like 26. So he would still fit our timeline too. And he's a guy that we can continue to like just kind of develop and grow with our system. And if we can bring him in early, talk him into like kind of like what we did with Siakam, where we're like, hey, we have this agreement, we'll re-sign you back at like a 2 or 3 year deal of like, let's say $15 million per year for Ayo Dosunmu. He gets a pay raise because he's having a good year. So he gets like double his salary, which isn't bad money. So for a guy to be off the bench and kind of be like a 6th man, 7th man, I don't think that's bad money. And a guy that could be like a spot starter if you need it here and there. So this is what I was thinking in this scenario, where Ayo would be like a huge plus and additive addition if we lose Mathurin, if we lose Walker, because he can kind of slot into that Mathurin role kind of. Obviously, nowhere near the upside as Mathurin has, but at least with Ayo, he is going to fill a role that you need. He's going to be coming off the bench. He's going to be fine with that. And he just kind of helps make the rotation make a little more sense, I guess, in that regard, where he's just going to fill a role. He's going to come in, be that guy that can provide some scoring off the bench, some playmaking. He's had some high assist games in his career, high rebounding games. He's had some triple doubles, I think, in his career. Just a guy that can kind of like do anything on the court, who's a decent defender too. He's definitely not a negative on that end. And I was just very intrigued by this idea. So let's say if we do that in this scenario, so we lose Shepherd and Isaiah Jackson, right? And the Bulls, they have their reasons for taking these guys. Like, they're interested in trading Jalen Smith, apparently. So they're going to be without him if they trade him. They're losing Vucevic, and they're losing Zach Collins. They're both on the last year of their deal. I'm sure they would like some sort of center on their team going into next season. And Isaiah Jackson, while I don't think he's a starting center, he at least adds like a cheap rotation big that they could use going into next season. And then Shepherd could be like a young 3-and-D guy they could develop that maybe they're just looking to add more shooting, some defense that at like a cheaper contract. Then maybe they don't want to pay like Ayo Dosunmu to come back, and for whatever reason, maybe they would, but that's just kind of my line of thinking. So imagine like a team of Haliburton, Nembhard, Nesmith, Siakam and Zubac as your starters. And then you have Ayo Dosunmu off the bench. You have Obi Toppin. You have TJ McConnell. You have Jay Huff as like your backup 5. And then you have Johnny Furphy. But also, guys, the big key here is you're adding like a top 3 or 4 pick as well. So that is like one stellar of a bench. So whatever guy you want to like exclude from that, maybe Jay Huff and Furphy. I mean, I know you need the size with Jay Huff, so he's probably going to play. Furphy, it just depends on who we draft, because obviously that player is going to play rotation minutes. So you're still going to have a lot to work with in terms of if you want to like trade some other salaries, especially if we're getting this top pick, and you have Ayo Dosunmu, like another guard that's going to really strengthen your guard rotation, who is going to bring a lot of the qualities that you're looking for a player off the bench. I just think that makes a ton of sense, guys. That's why I was saying like these two trades, I think, could really be trades that propel us back into contention and help us possibly win our first title in NBA history. I really believe that. I really think that's a deep team, and I think that would cover up for a lot of the hurt we'd be having with losing Mathurin, with losing Walker, with losing Shepherd and Isaiah Jackson even in these deals. So yeah, that's a lot of guys, a lot of young talent you're giving up on essentially, but when you still have like your Nembhards, your Haliburtons, of course, your Nesmiths, you're still bringing in a guy that's young, and Ayo Dosunmu, who's like 26 or so. You still have Johnny Furphy. You still have Cam Jones even. I haven't even brought him up, who could develop into something. And you're bringing in a top 3 or 4 pick who's obviously going to be like 19 years old. So we have plenty of youth still that's going to carry us into like the next phase of like even when Siakam's ready or like kind of slowing down. Obviously, TJ only has a few years left, so that's kind of where like Cam Jones and Ayo Dosunmu kind of fit in, where they can help bridge that gap if TJ starts slowing down. So let me know what you guys think about this trade too. If you guys know anything about Ayo Dosunmu, if you're a fan of his, if you think this would be a good trade to kind of shore up that rotation in this regard, if we do trade Mathurin and Walker, and just give me your guys' thoughts and comments, and I would love to hear it. But I got to really thinking about this today, and it really fascinated me, and I was like, I got to talk about this and do a trade podcast about this too, because the trade deadline's only about 3 weeks away, guys, or so. So it's getting to be do or die time. And like I said, with that news a little bit about Mathurin, take that with a grain of salt if you want. Maybe it's absolutely nothing. I'm not reading too much into it, but I'm also trying to look at the side of like, all right, what if there is something to it? So there's a lot of that I'm factoring in, and not trying to have my biases get in the way of like us possibly trading Mathurin, because I can understand the argument for why it would make sense to trade him, even though I don't think it makes sense to trade him ultimately. I could see where the argument is to be had, I guess. And that's kind of where I fall on that with Mathurin. I really hope we keep him. I hope we can find a different way to get a starting center, but like if you get a center of like Zubac's caliber, that's a pretty hard one to pass up on. So I guess my main thing is like, if you're going to trade Mathurin, make it worth it. Do not trade him for like a Daniel Gafford or like Nicholas Claxton, like these type of centers. And I like Gafford, don't get me wrong. I would love to get Gafford, but not for Mathurin. So at least make it worth it and make it not hurt as bad if you're going to trade Mathurin. At least get like someone of that caliber back. And that's all I'm really asking for. I can't be as upset with it if that happens, if that's the case, but I will be irate if we trade Mathurin for like Daniel Gafford or something crazy like that. That's where I think all of Pacer Nation's going to be a little upset over that one. Even if you're not a Mathurin fan, you're going to be upset with that return for Mathurin, I think, without question. So I would love to know your guys' opinions on this. What do you guys think? Just like I said, look at the Pacer Pulse podcast and YouTube. You'll find it in there. We'd love to talk to you guys about it there. And I just think this is very interesting. I really do think that's like a championship core. And it's one that would be able to be around for a while. I know Zubac's like 28 or so. So he is getting older, but the way he plays, I mean, he's such a grounded type of player anyways. I don't think it's going to really affect his game too much. And he does provide us a lot of things that we've been missing, especially this year with our paint defense being awful, our rebounding, our offensive rebounding usually being bad too, and just points in the paint wise. Like, I think obviously not one player is going to help all that, but I think he's going to help create a lot more room in the paint to be able to score this pick and rolls with his lob finishing, with his just finishing inside in general. He's a big body. He's going to be able to protect the paint at a high level that we desperately need. And he's going to be a strong rebounder. We know that. He always has been in his career, something we haven't had since Sabonis has been on this team. So it would make a lot of sense. So I don't know, guys. I just thought, like I said, this has been weighing on me the last few days, and I really wanted to just kind of go over this and talk about it on the podcast and get your guys' thoughts and opinions on it too if you reach out. But if not, I hope you guys at least enjoyed it and got your guys' like wheels spinning a little bit and like what could possibly happen. I'm not saying that's going to happen for sure, but we have to keep our mind open to a lot of these things. And I think like we're not thinking of that other aspect. If it was as if like if we do trade Mathurin, how are we going to like shore up that spot then in the rotation? That's why I really like the Io DeSumo idea and where I could live with that if that's what would end up happening if we got rid of Mathurin. Because Io, he would fill a very important role with this team that I think he would be fine with a bench role as well and kind of make the rotations kind of make more sense because there's no way we don't start Mathurin if we bring him back. Because, like, he's just too talented to not start, but I also love Neesmith too, and I understand why he should start too, and Nembhard, I guess, too, for that reason too. And so it's a hard line to toe, guys, but, like, I also think that we're not going to get the Walker Kesslers. I think that would be, like, my number one get, but I don't think that's really realistic either. But all in all, guys, that's what I have for today. Those are my two trades that I think that could ultimately propel us into championship contention again, and that I think if we make those deals, guys, we're a team to be reckoned with. I really do. I really think we'd be scary, and no team would want to face us in the East coming into next season. I know that for a fact. Adding Zubac, adding Io DeSumo, and then adding like a top 3 or 4 pick, I mean, that would be one heck of a move, or a couple of moves before Haliburton comes back. So, I don't know. Fun podcast for me, guys. Just something I've been thinking about the last few days as we approach the deadline here soon. And I know I've been doing a lot of trade podcasts lately, but can't help it, guys. Like, it's a pivotal trade season for us right now, and we're in the news a lot. We know we're in the market for a starting center, but I also think there's other areas we're gonna have to like patch up if we do end up making a move or end up trading a Mathurin or things like that. So I do want to end this by saying I do not want to trade Mathurin. So that's going to be the last thing I say. I do not want to trade Mathurin. And of course, if you guys could always just leave me a like, a comment, and subscribe on YouTube, I always appreciate it. And 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, it means the world to me. I can't do this without you guys. And I'm a fan, bringing a fan perspective. And I have just as much a love for this team as any of y'all have. And I want to create that community with this podcast, guys, and just really extend on that. So I really appreciate you guys listening, Pacer Nation, and I will talk to you soon.